I'm Mark Golub. Welcome to part 2 of our roundtable discussion of the past year from a Jewish perspective. What are the major events that had an impact on Jewish life, on the state of Israel, on American Jewry, on world Jewry? And once again, I'm pleased to be joined by a wonderful panel of friends who bring unusual insight to bear on any issue they discuss with us. To begin with, Micah Halpern, syndicated columnist and publisher of his own blog, The Micah Report, and the author of Thugs, which chronicles how history's most notorious despots transformed the world. Dr. Stephen Bayme, director of the Contemporary Jewish Life Department of the American Jewish Committee and their Kupelman Institute on American Jewish-Israeli Relations. Neal, Sher, an attorney in private practice in New York, who was the former director of AIPAC and the former head of the Justice Department's Chief Office of Special Investigations that hunted Nazi war criminals. And Susie Rosenbluth, the outspoken editor of the Jewish Voice and Opinion, a monthly journal promoting classical Judaism. And I thank all four of you for joining me once again. We discussed last time we were together basically the UN vote, and all four of you said that as you looked at the last year, that was the most significant moment in Jewish life. And on this hour, I simply sort of want to go through a whole series of things which you would rank second to one degree or another. And I want to make a quick reference and then move on from it. But you did start, Micah, by saying that also you thought Operation Pillar of Defense, the Israeli operation in Gaza, was significant. Again, just sort of tell me why, from your perspective, it was significant in terms of its impact going forward in Jewish life.
Well, there are certain elements that are critical to understanding the operation and how it fits into a pinnacle, a chief position in terms of the year. The first is that it got to the point of enough. At a certain point in time, Israel had to make the decision that there are only so many rockets they can absorb before they respond. And that was critical. That is not just taking a stand, but being able to say, we are not going to be victim anymore. We're making a decision to defend ourselves. And that is exactly it. So that operation was critical. It was also critical to note that Israel chose not to go in on the ground for numerous reasons. The most important reason is that the potential loss that would take place, and that on 6 weeks before a national election, no real politician could risk the potential damage that would take place if they did go on the ground. So it was only a temporary action. They wanted to get to a ceasefire, a status quo where Hamas was not shooting rockets at them. And that's important. It's important that our viewers see and recognize that Israelis were literally suffering under a regular bombardment, and they had to stop that.
You know, Steve, I was at a AIFL meeting, their gala at the Plaza Hotel, and Brett Stevens spoke. And Brett Stevens made the point that from his perspective, the Sde Road situation where they had to live under this constant barrage of Hamas rockets was not something that the Jewish people should be proud of. That Israel was not created to, in essence, create more Jewish victims. And that what he wanted the State of Israel to represent was what the Pillar of Defense operation really symbolized. The defense of Israelis even in the State of Israel. As you looked at it, do you see any point in his point? And in general, how did you feel about the operation?
Mark, every summer I take a group of American university presidents to Israel. We always visit Sderot. This long preceded the Gaza mini war. The reaction I get there, very similar to what Brett is referring to, is that American university presidents, not Jewish, they visit there, they hear what's going on, and they say, this is not something I can live with. In other words, it's intolerable. The good news, if you will, of the Gaza war is basically there was a statement of moral clarity. It was very clear in terms of the press reports, in terms of the president's statements, that this was a war that Hamas started. Israel had the right, the responsibility to defend itself. The ceasefire has held. I hope it will hold. But essentially, Hamas did not gain from this war in terms of delegitimizing Israel, the way we were discussing last week about the UN vote. I think, if anything, Israel emerged as in a stronger position because the world suddenly understood exactly what Sderot was all about.
Are you concerned at all about the way in which the media often discuss the issue of disproportionate force being used by Israel?
Well, of course. I mean, and this is really the heart of the infamous Goldstone report of a few years back, talking about the earlier Gaza, attacks or mini war, if you will. I think there are a couple of points that are important. One is, and Steve does a great service by bringing university presidents and whoever else goes there. But what's amazing is that Israel tolerated these attacks for so long before they went in or before they took some sort of real strong action. I don't know any other country on the face of the map who would do the same thing. I mean, can you imagine if Mexico was lobbing into Texas? We do something immediately. And this is part and parcel of the fact that Israel, is treated to a different standard, held to a different standard. I'm glad there's a ceasefire, but I think we've learned from history that, I don't expect it to last forever. And there are a lot of people who are concerned that Hamas, either through, coming through the ocean, the Mediterranean, will get more Iranian weaponry. And there's also a concern it's going to come in through Egypt. So no one believes this will be a permanent resolution. It's going to start up again. The question is when and with what type of weaponry. Because remember, in this past war, we saw something different. We saw rockets getting very, very close to Tel Aviv. And so now Israel, if you think about it, and by the way, Iran was the big winner in this Gaza conflict. Not Morsi as much as Iran. They've got their surrogates in their proxies up in the north with Hezbollah. They have them in the south in Gaza. And they're concerned about Israel going after them. And Israel now has got to worry about its borders in addition to Iran.
Susie, you mentioned that one of the things that you felt was significant was the success of the Iron Dome, which came out of Operation Pillar of Defense.
Well, it started, the technology and the development of it was before.
But this was its first real use.
They brought it out.
And it was remarkably successful.
Correct.
In general, speak about how you feel the significance of this entire operation, the response of the media. How did you view it?
Obviously, the fact that the United States took a position early on and that it was moral clarity, that it was so clear. Those of us who are parents could see, the toddler who is going and continually doing something until the parent finally explodes and did what they did. What I think it also said was we're dealing with a real player here with Israel in terms of technology, in terms of certainly while Israel gets clobbered, no matter what it does, you didn't have carpet bombing. They were from the air. It was targeted. I think the fact that Israel was as successful as it was from a technological standpoint was awe-inspiring. And I think it made a very definite impact on the world.
Did it go far enough, Micah? Was it effective enough?
It depended on your perspective. The Israeli leadership had a very modest objective. Their objective was from the outset to create a ceasefire. That was it. The mayors in the peripheral area, which actually abut Gaza, had a much greater objective.
Correct.
Their objective was to say, hey, let's solve this problem. Solve the problem
Once and for all.
Once and for all. Oust Hamas, either hand it over to the Palestinian Authority or give it to an international force. Israel doesn't need to be there. Not so that Israel should invade or occupy, but rather oust Hamas. That was not the objective of Israel. Interestingly, the objective of Hamas, though, and this is where I think Hamas was enormously victorious. And that's where
Was
I disagree-
victorious.
Was victorious. And that's where I disagree with Steve's analysis here. Hamas's objective was to strike fear into the hearts of millions of Israelis. Not necessarily kill them. I'm not saying that if Israelis would have died, they would have cried. The point is that they literally stripped the explosive heads off of their Fajr rockets in order to expand the range of those rockets to get them further into Israel. And you can see this. My evidence is that you'll see on the YouTube videos where the rockets actually go into buildings and all you see is a hole in the building. There was no explosion. Right? It made the distance. It got that extra 25 kilometers by reducing a head of 300 kilos, of 200 pounds or something like that. That's important. So they were able to get further distance. And they succeeded. Why did they succeed? Because millions of Israelis cowered in fear. And that propelled them to a level of hero in the Islamic world
And they
in
did
the Arabic
celebrate
world.
as if they had won.
And they celebrated as if they've won. And Khalid Mashal's arrival into Gaza for the first time in his life, the international leader of Hamas, comes to Gaza for the first time in his life, gets down and kisses the ground and says, "We defeated Israel." And it's an important point. And this is the beginning of the major battle against Israel. We've won.
So on balance for you, a positive for Israel or a negative?
I think on the one hand, Israel took a stand, defended itself, set up a new status quo, which is important. But on the other hand, it created a very ugly situation where Hamas was truly elevated to a level which they had never been before. And Abbas suffered the consequences of that.
Your comment.
I think Micah is correct in distinguishing between a psychological victory and a victory in the court of morality, and
yes.
I was emphasizing the latter. In terms of the things Micah mentions, bear in mind Israel has been down this road before. During the Scud missile attacks in 1991, people left Tel Aviv in droves. During the Lebanon War a number of years ago, there was again enormous personal anguish and pain of people having to leave or having to go into bunkers. I think the lesson is Israel was able to take it. And in that sense, I think our confidence level ought to be still there, that regardless of what Hamas said, Israel managed to absorb this and was able to pursue it until such time as it attained the ceasefire. If anything, by the way, one of the reasons I guess I'm a bit more sanguine on this is that I remember a friend asking me the next day, how long will the ceasefire last? And I said, I'll give it about 7 hours. Now, I was glad to have been wrong about that, and hopefully I'll continue to be wrong.
Well, it was 18 minutes because there were 11 violations in the first 18
Yes,
minutes.
but basically it has still held. I want to ask you to comment. Last week you brought up a study that you're going to speak about in a moment on American Jewish attitudes. But April 13th, 2012, Peter Bayme publishes The Crisis of Zionism. It is a book which gets an enormous amount of attention. Peter is asked to speak everywhere. And his basic position is that it is now very difficult to be both a liberal in the Jewish community, as Jews have tended to be, and to be a Zionist. As you look, not necessarily at The Crisis of Zionism as a book, but what Peter represents right now on the American Jewish scene, how important was that publication? What does it say? And in essence, it leads us into what you think is one of the most important events of the Jewish year 2012, the study on American Jewish attitudes and thoughts and behaviors.
In his footnotes, Mark, Peter credits me as one of the, what he calls one of the most perceptive observers of the American Jewish scene. It's one among many other mistakes he makes throughout
No,
that
there he
book.
was right.
Peter, by his own admission, I think, concedes that he underestimated the importance of assimilation. In other words, his argument was that younger American Jews are turning away from Israel for reasons of policy. He was then criticized, and quite appropriately so, is that the distancing from Israel is about a matter of distancing from matters Jewish. So one key flaw in the book is that he's badly underestimated the toll of assimilation, and that's something that requires much further attention. I think the second major flaw, though, and this is what has captured all the attention, and rightfully so, is that there's no sense in Peter's book about what Israel is up against. In other words, it's a sort of if-only wistfulness going through it, that if only the Israelis were more forthcoming, then we live in a much wonderful world, a much more beautiful world. I think that wistfulness badly underestimates the Arab Spring, for example. By the way, I should apologize. I really dislike the term Arab Spring. It's a winter. It's hardly a Czech Prague Spring along those lines. But it shows you the kind of instability that Israel is coexisting with. It shows you the kind of world in which Israel functions. Daily threats to eliminate Israel. We spoke about Hamas earlier. Somehow or other, this doesn't get enough play in the book. If anything, the conclusion of the book is that American Jewish leaders are retarding the peace process by supporting the state of Israel. My response to that basically is that American Jewish leaders are doing what needs to be done, namely that Israel's primary, if not only friend, is the United States. And our clout is in Washington, and I did explain this to Peter, by the way, in the interview we had. In Washington, we want to make it crystal clear to the United States government that there is no moral equivalence between Israel and Palestinians, and we feel it's America's interest and America's responsibility to be supporting the government of Israel. So in that sense, I think the book is very severely flawed. That said, Peter has an incredible gift of writing. It's a page turner in every sense of the word. And
it reflects something in the American Jewish community.
And he is a poster child for young people who say, I am Zionist and pro-peace, pro-J Street. That's his natural constituency. Those are real people, and yes, Peter does speak for them.
Any response to the entire issue that Peter's book represents?
Well, I mean, first let me say I agree with Steve's analysis as to some of the major weaknesses to Beinhardt's book. He wanted to interview me. I mean, I knew where he was coming from as the former head of AIPAC, and I didn't want to get into it. No, I think there are serious problems. I think he does a disservice to Israel and to the pro-Israel community. I think Beinhardt's approach and his supporters are used by those who do not wish Israel well.
You understand, by the way, when you talk to Peter, he wishes Israel well.
That's what he says.
You don't believe it's true?
Well, no, I believe that's what he wants, but I
yes,
think
he does.
Then,
He does.
Then there's a
he has his own vision on how
then he's
that
got a
should
vision,
happen.
and I would say that is terribly naive and unrealistic. It's very easy to say, I love Israel, I support Israel, I wish it well, and it can only do well if it listens to me.
Okay. Does
That's
he
the attitude.
represent a stream of thought within the
Yes,
American?
he is J Street incarnate, as I see it.
And does that frighten you?
Yeah.
Because?
I think the word naivete comes to mind. I attended, really out of curiosity, the first J Street conference, whatever it was called, a couple of years back. And I got to admit, I knew a lot of people there, I knew a lot of the journalists, and they were surprised to see me. AIPAC, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm curious. And I sort of felt I was back at college in the 60s. I went to Cornell in the mid-60s. Number one, I never saw more adults with ponytails in my life. And secondly, it was a 60s
Not that you're
attitude.
critical of ponytails.
Not that I'm critical at all, but
He's describing.
it was describing, when someone starts a conversation and they say, with all due respect, you know what they mean. You know what they mean. Everyone at the J Street conference, at the various sessions, which were very interesting, people got up and they said, I love Israel, but, and then, whoom, it all comes out. Israel is doing this wrong, is doing that wrong. It was really an eye-opening experience, and I think it's dangerous because what it is, J Street is not a pro-Israel lobby, as far as I'm concerned. It is turned into Obama's lobby to Israel. It gives people some cover, and I'm concerned about that. When I was the head of AIPAC, during Oslo, the flawed Oslo process, and I confess, and I've lost sleep over it, I was lobbying for it. I was in effect lobbying for aid to Arafat, which is what the U.S. government wanted and what the government of Israel wanted.
So you did the right thing at the time.
Well, yeah, I guess.
You did.
I guess. But at the time, I remember there were people who were opposed to Oslo, and they went up to Capitol Hill, and they were lobbying fiercely against the policies of the elected government of Israel. And I remember, I'm not going to give names, but I remember talking to these people and I said, you know, the time is going to come when the shoe's going to be on the other foot. And you're going to have people, and that's what J Street is, they're going up to Capitol Hill lobbying against the elected government of Israel. And I think no matter where you're coming from, left, right, whatever, I think that's a very, very dangerous policy.
Your experience with the Beinart J Street phenomenon, and where is, at the moment, as we end 2012, where is the fulcrum right now in terms of how young Jews and liberal Jews and Jews who believe they care very deeply about the state of Israel, but who also believe it has sort of lost its moral compass, where are they in the entire community? And from your perspective, is there any legitimacy to them?
Okay. I think, because I was one of the people, I wasn't actually lobbying, but I certainly was writing about it and supporting those who were lobbying against the Oslo Accords. The feeling was that we weren't doing it as American Jews, that we're telling you this is what we want Israel to do. The position that many of them took was that we are representing the people in Israel, groups in Israel, who are opposed to it. Very much the way, not J Street, but Peace Now operates.
Why doesn't J Street feel the same thing?
J Street doesn't claim to be representing any groups in Israel. They claim to be representing what they think is the proper way for the United
Is
States
in
and
the
Israel.
best interest of
And
Israel.
is in the best interest.
But they are applauded and supported by outspoken, influential
There are people who
voices
do.
within Israel.
Americans for
That's it.
Peace Now, for example, with whom I disagree, certainly will say, I mean, they are supporting the Shalom Akshav in Israel, which is very, I think it's very different from what J Street is doing. I think
Does the Beinart phenomenon and what it represents trouble you?
it troubles me insofar that it exists and it's
All right.
there. Of
And
course,
how-
it's troubling.
I guess what I'm really asking you is, how do you assess the extent to which it exists? Is it at the moment a serious problem to you, a minor problem to you? And again, we have nobody here in this panel who is J Street,
Of course
who will talk on their behalf. And so I even hear as the discussion goes, somebody saying, well, why isn't there somebody defending J Street? It's not about defending J Street. I want to understand from your perspective, how do you see it playing out right now as an observer of the Jewish scene?
I think it's troubling and I think it's important now because I think their message is falling on willing ears in the administration, in the United States government. And I think that's very troubling right now. Do I think it is going to be long-range problematic? I don't. I don't know if 25, 30 years from now, those are going to be the people who are still going to be saying, I love Israel and I'm fighting for this. I think the people, what we can see from demography, what you can see, where is the Jewish community going? Where are the numbers? I gave you the numbers of my grandchildren a while ago and you all, jumped.
11 grandchildren.
11 weeks, poo. But that's not unusual at all in the community in which I write for, the community that I'm involved with. It is hardly unusual.
Yes, although it's very, very small, very narrow.
It's a narrow community,
Yes.
but it's growing, and the demographic studies show that it is nothing to trifle with long range.
As you look at
Or in Israel, I
Okay.
should say.
As you look at the Beinart J Street phenomenon, and I sort of wish now that there was somebody in a ponytail with us right now. How do you analyze it?
I'd say that, firstly, Beinart is an unbelievable stylist, and he writes a gripping and compelling book. Even if you disagree with it, you find yourself nodding very often throughout the book. It's really very well done. I think that he's footloose and fancy-free with several very critical issues. The overuse of the word apartheid and racism, I think, is an abuse of the concept, and I think that it's dangerous given just how important those ideas are. And to paint Israel in that category, I think, is a total misuse of history and abuse of the concepts of racism and apartheid. And I want that to be very, very clear. I think that his rhetoric is sometimes so far off the target. He describes one point.
But does it resonate with Jews
No, it can't
today?
resonate. But it does if it's false. If it's false, it doesn't matter. He says that if the leadership of the Jewish community were sitting in the Oval Office with the president, the only person that would represent the Zionist ideal in that room would be the President of the United States. That's a near exact quote, meaning the Jewish leadership itself does not represent
American Jewry.
American Zionist
No,
ideals, Zionist ideals, and the President of the United States does. Does it resonate? Of course it does. He's actually, if anything, he's actually writing for that community. He's actually writing to engage that community and move them along, both because he knows where they're coming from and he can articulate that, but also he's trying to move them into that sphere. He's giving voice to a very significant group. Am I upset by it? No, it doesn't bother me that significantly. Why? Because for many of these people, they are not going to, they're going to take the issue, say yes, oh hum, and move on to the other issues that they're dealing with. They're really not engaged in the Jewish debate. The Jewish debate itself requires Israel to be a central component of it. That's why Peter is such an important arguer. He's in the debate. The vast majority of the people listening to his discussion are not. And that's an important point.
I agree.
So I want to now come to the demographic study. Last week you said for you it was one of the most important events of 2012. But you do feel that the study was very
I think the
significant.
release of it is a landmark document, a landmark moment in the year 2012 that'll have repercussions for 10, 20, 30 years down the road.
And we can't do it in detail, but take one or two of the things that came out of it that moved you the most.
61% of children being raised in Jewish homes today in the 8-county New York City area, which means the 5 boroughs plus Nassau, Suffolk, and Westchester.
What percentage?
61% of the children being raised in those 8 counties who are Jews are being raised in Orthodox homes. The number of Orthodox Jewish families has increased by about 30% just in the last 10 years. I believe if my numbers are correct, I believe it was like 376,000 Orthodox Jews in those 8 counties in 2001, and it's now up to 496,000. That's a very significant increase. I think, again, if you do the math, it's about 30%. It needs to be qualified by saying New York is not the rest of the country, and New York is the capital of Orthodox Jewish America. However, the real point is that if you're talking about the formation of Jews, issues of fertility, marriage, age of marriage, the older you get married, the fewer children you're going to have. It's the Orthodox who are basically doing an incredible job at encouraging Jewish marriage and family formation. Now, the implications of that, the ramifications of that need to be addressed. The only other group that's rising in numbers are those who are unaffiliated, which should disturb us because unaffiliation means lack of interest in matters Jewish. Inside the conservative reform movements, there's been zero growth. It's been flat. Again, New York is not the rest of the country. The conservative reform movements may very well be much stronger outside of New York. But you can't ignore the trends and say, to what extent will this be mirrored elsewhere? There's no question Orthodox Jews are getting married younger, they're having more children, the retention rate is quite high, and that's what, in many ways, the contours of the Jewish community will be very different 10, 15, 20 years from now. Now, what do those contours mean? On the one hand, what I think needs to be celebrated is that Orthodox Jews really are committed to the collective Jewish endeavor. What they mean by Jewish identity is about peoplehood. They mean other things as well. They mean Jewish law, they mean Jewish study, but they really take seriously the concept of peoplehood and commitment to the collective Jewish welfare. Secondly, Orthodox Jews will spare no efforts in terms of the Jewish education of their children. It's a non-negotiable item. Well, again, we're supposed to be people of the book. Yes, we're people of the book in the sense that we invest very heavily in Jewish education. I think the downside is twofold. Number one is that the crisis within Orthodoxy generally, within the what might be called the centrist and right-wing Orthodox world more specifically, there is a modern Orthodox grouping, but it's really quite small. The centrist and ultra-Orthodox grouping, which is the 90% of the community, 95% of the community, oftentimes have very limited, almost minimal contact with what's going on in the rest of the Jewish community. Recently, we had a dinner honoring a university president of Cornell at AJC. I invited an Orthodox academic who wanted to simply attend. He turned to me during the dinner and he said, you know, my people have no idea whatsoever of how much you guys do for Israel. This was simply isolation. In other words, simply not knowing. Secondly, Orthodox Jews are not terribly adept at translating their concerns into resonance with the broader American public. They oftentimes spend a lot of time talking to themselves. Much as I endorse Orthodox education, I often find that it's very narrow, that it's very weak in many areas, in many secular areas, and many Jewish areas, it's Jewishly unsophisticated. Certainly in terms of understanding of Jewish history, that's a very weak spot inside Orthodox education. So I look at this study, and I know Susan will want to take issue, but by all means, I'm happy to debate this any day of the week, Susan, any moment of the week. I look at this study and I say, yes, it's a landmark study because it's telling us a great deal about not what's going to happen tomorrow, but what we have to look forward to as the Jewish community continues into the 21st century. I have good reasons for pride, but I also have considerable forebodings.
That's very beautifully done. The publication is an event that occurred in 2012, but what you're saying is it's not necessarily an event that emanates out of 2012 because this is a study of both the past and the future as we're about to experience Jewish life. But what you're saying is today you've learned something which in your role at the AJC is going to help you try to create programs and policies going forward. I assume in some way that's why this is an important feature to you of, quote, 2012.
Without question, and the study has caused all sorts of institutional rethinking, both internally inside AJC and I think probably within other Jewish organizations as well. Who are our members going to be? Who are our constituents, our supporters? And what is our leadership going to look like? To give you one small illustration, though, we have to ask ourselves if, say, the overall Orthodox percentage in the general population, I believe, is about 12%. In New York City, it's much higher, obviously. If 12% of the Jewish population is Orthodox, what percentage do you think is Orthodoxy represented on AJC levels? Less than 1%. On staff levels, by the way, it's very different. Among the senior staff of AJC today, actually closer to 30% are Orthodox. But the bottom line is that we have a rising Jewish demographic that is not at all represented or visible inside AJC forums.
And you described some of the reasons why. They're not involved the same way.
That's quite true.
And you're also very honest in saying that although this is a greater New York phenomenon, if you go outside of New York, the percentage of Orthodox is much smaller.
Absolutely.
And what you're really trying to do outside of New York, even in New York too, is create non-Orthodox styles of Jewish life that can be meaningful for people who are never going to be part of the Orthodox
Absolutely,
community.
Mark. And the real hope for the Jewish future, the one I think we need to aspire to, although again I'm somewhat skeptical, is to what extent will we create serious non-Orthodox Judaism, particularly within the conservative reform movements.
And you understand, by the way, I am committed philosophically to the idea of Jewish pluralism. And I think that has been one of the great contributions of the American Jewish scene. I don't want to see American Jewish pluralism die.
Absolutely.
Any comment?
Many. Many comments.
Let's see.
Not that I disagree with the observation of the study. The study is very, very important. I first want to take on the question of the insular nature of the Orthodox community. The Orthodox community needs to be insular. That's who they are. They have no interest in the global Jewish community because they see that as the danger. There's a fear of breaking out. So that's why it's easier for them to marry within, because they realize very clearly, and the Jewish educational aspect is enormously important within that. That is, we see from the studies, not just this study, but many, many other studies, the more one has Jewish education, the less likely you are to leave Judaism. And so it becomes very, very important. The reality is that commitment is connected there. The other component is that as one gets less and less connected to the Jewish community, the less the important values of Judaism are to you, to your family, and the people around you. So it's interesting, though, to note the future, I'm not concerned about the future of Judaism as a result of that. Not just because of Orthodoxy and its growth, but because I really and truly believe that there are exciting and dynamic places for Jews to go. Judaism
Other
today,
than Orthodox?
Other than Orthodoxy, yes. Not just because money is going there, but there are creative
But you
spirits.
do understand that the number of unaffiliated, assimilated Jews is rising at an alarming rate.
And I'm not concerned about it because the number, well, because fundamentally we're counting Jews that might not have been counted before that also. Because you say that you have some relation that was once Jewish, or that someone in your house might consider themselves Jewish, does not make you Jewish in terms of the
I
numbers.
don't think we're talking
Michael,
about
we're
that.
not talking about that. We're talking about a Jew who, for argument's sake, is brought up by 2 committed parents, 4 committed Jewish grandparents. They go off to a university, they meet lovely people, they have a worldview that is global, not particularistic. They don't understand the extent to which Jewish family is somewhere deep inside them and will emerge at some point. And they very easily just move away. We're not talking about the fringe to begin with. We're talking about the loss of Jews who have been within the community. Let me make a quick plug here. And I don't mean to be self-serving, but it's important for me to say. One of the things that I consider to be an important development of 2012 is the fact that Shalom TV is now a linear, it's called linear in the trade, a live channel on American television, and we're now being seen, the 5 of us are being seen on channel 138 of Cablevision. We're on RCN. January 1st, we're on Metrocast throughout New England. This is the first time there's ever been a serious Jewish television channel in America. And by the way, that fact in and of itself is startling to me to say. There's never been a serious Jewish channel in all of American Jewish history. No, there has not been. And one of the things that I find all the time now is I'm getting flooded by incredible emails from people who say to me, I got such an email today from a lovely woman married to an Israeli. And she said to me, I love Shalom TV. I love what you're doing. I love learning. I now can study Hebrew on television. My husband is Israeli. He goes, what are you watching that for? What are you watching that for? And then I find him secretly watching Shalom TV. That to me, secretly, he doesn't want, he's watching Shalom TV. And I understand that. I understand that what a Jewish television channel can provide is a way for people who want to put their foot in, but they don't want to go through the door yet.
That's my whole point.
And I'm saying that there
That's what
are
Chabad has been doing for years.
No, it's not.
Oh, they do.
And Chabad does many good things.
They do it
but
on-
they're
they
not-
do it on
they're-
college
they're not
campuses that
Shalom
way.
TV. And what we have an ability to do here is reach people who are absolutely distant, and there's a way in. And the people that Steve is referring to in this study are not those who were already far away. We're losing those in a way, and Peter Beinart's, from what I experience, the Peter Beinart phenomenon affects not only young people, it affects people our age. Who say to me all the time, Israel isn't acting in the right way, and how can I, as a principled Jew with Jewish values, feel close to the state of Israel? And we are losing Jews all the time.
I need to follow up here because it's important, and I think that a paradigm that I'm creating has been missed. I firmly believe that we live in the most democratic society ever in the United States, and as a result, Jews at any age, whether they be older or younger, but especially as they come of age, have the ability to decide where they're going to go. And there's no guilt. The anti-Semitism is relatively minimal. If anything, it's actually urging them away from Judaism than anything else, if there is pressure in that way. In order to do that, and that's the freedom of ideas, the democracy of ideas, in order to succeed, we have to make a Judaism which is exciting and dynamic, not watered down. We should not be afraid of this, and we should not be afraid of its potential direction. I'm not saying everyone should be Orthodox to do that. As an Orthodox person, I recognize that. I know that.
You want there to be Jewish pluralism.
I need it to be, because in many ways it makes life interesting. It makes for a much broader education. It allows me to engage in everything else. And this is a problem. Fundamentally, we see the breaking down of the Jewish community as a weakness of the Jewish community. And I don't see it that way. I'm sorry. I see it as an opportunity to build exciting and creative things and say, if you want to join, join. If not,
Okay,
I can't
very
stop
fair.
you.
I see
I
it-
can't stop you.
I find it very interesting when we're talking about wanting and supporting Jewish pluralism. Obviously, we live in the most democratic country imaginable. I think the idea of not giving full respect to people who want to practice Judaism or anything else that doesn't hurt anybody, full respect and full rights, and go do I want to support it? Do I want to support Jewish pluralism financially? No.
Really?
No.
In other words, if there was a federation that was giving grants to both Orthodox and non-Orthodox day schools, you'd want the federation to take your dollar, give it to the Orthodox day school, but not to the non-Orthodox day school.
It is what is happening.
I just want to know, is that your position?
My position is that I will give to the Jewish schools in the area, and I
You
don't.
will you won't even give to federation.
No, I do not
that's
give to federation.
amazing to
It's
me.
for that reason, by the way, that federations give
amazing
less
to
and
me.
less
Yes.
to Orthodox community.
Correct.
And appropriately so,
because
obviously.
because the federation says we're community-based,
Yes.
and there's this part of
Oh,
the
you're
community.
Orthodox. Do you agree with her?
No, I do
Okay.
not. In the community, the federation then says, which is community-based, said, why should we support a group of people that don't support the community? And
They're
so what
right.
it does is it,
They're right.
Well, Susan, I beg to, not only beg to differ, but you'll have to forgive me. Federation stands for the Jewish people.
I agree.
And therefore, a donation to Federation, no matter how small, is a statement of, I want to be part of this collective Jewish endeavor. When Jews refuse to contribute, whether on the right or on the left, they are undermining that collective welfare. I think when I mentioned the Orthodox isolationism, I didn't have that in mind because, as it happens, most of the Orthodox Jews I know do give to Federation.
There's a matter when I say give, and there's giving and there's giving.
No. You
No, let me
said
just-
you would
made
not
it
support
very
Jewish
clear.
I don't know if I would support. I don't know whether I would consider an $18 donation to be supporting. In other words, I don't think Federation is doing
I know,
anything
but you
bad.
you have a philosophy, and your philosophy is you don't want to support
It is
Jewish education that's not in an Orthodox context.
Now, and my,
But
my
I would.
com-
But since there's no other way, I can't sit there and say, "Here's my money to Federation. I want you to spend my $18 here and not there." I mean,
But you can, but
well,
that's a separate issue.
my
But
feeling
you
is
don't
that
want to support it.
I don't want to.
I'm
If
just
I'm going to
shocked.
be supporting
I am
education,
shocked.
My
my financial donation
I am
is
shocked.
going
All right,
is
and
going
my
elsewhere.
counter argument to you will be is that you will have a much weaker Jewish community, a much more fragmented one, and frankly, from your own self-interest in terms of the vibrancy of an Orthodox community, they will be weakened by weaker conservative and Reform communities. So in that respect, first of all, I'd say simply empirically, I think your position is an isolated one within the Orthodox community. Now, as critical as I am of Orthodoxy generally, I think by and large, Orthodox Jews pretty much have accepted the notion that the Federation represents the entire Jewish people, and we have an obligation.
And
have a
that
difference of
all
opinion.
education is of value.
And all education
I
is
have
value. Exactly.
no
That's the position
argument.
of the Orthodox Union,
I
by
have
the way.
no.
That's,
I know. I have no argument when we're talking about if someone were to.
You know, there's some non-Orthodox Jews who have sometimes said to me, why should I give to Orthodox Jewish? And
Absolutely.
I think they're 100% wrong. And conversely, it's shocking to me if I hear a committed Jew, and I consider you to be one of the most committed Jews I know, for you to say there's any part of the Jewish community you don't want to support financially, it boggles my mind. And Bo, you have every right to it, and it does not change how much I respect your commitment to Jewish life. I just think you're making a horrible mistake.
Let me. I don't know if it's going to make any difference. My feeling certainly is on outreach. For example, we've spoken a few times about your taking the university presidents to Israel. That's the kind of action that I could see people in the communities that I write for getting very excited about and saying, yes, that would be something we would support. If someone were going to say to us, we want to support the idea, no matter where it's coming from, of giving out whatever for certain holidays,
Hebrew
nobody
high
is
school,
arguing.
A Hebrew high school
Right,
that is an alternative to a yeshiva in a community.
right.
You don't want to support a Hebrew high school. a non-Orthodox Hebrew high school?
It depends on what's being taught. If we're talking about teaching them, if we're talking about teaching children that I am going to be supportive financially of prayer and a theological outlook that does not match my own, I'm not supporting it.
I'm shocked. Boy, here you are, a secular Jew, committed secular Jew. What do you make of all this?
Well,
Although I give it every right to be there.
you know, I
No, you
think
don't, by the way.
Oh, I do.
If you're not willing to support it, you don't really. What you're really hoping is it dies.
Absolutely not.
Yes, because-
I'm assuming there are other people who will support
Okay.
it.
What do you
Well,
make
I
of
mean,
all
I
this?
think it's very significant. I look at it, frankly, from what it means for the support of Israel, because I still believe that, to me, that is so central. Steve mentioned before the problem of assimilation, and I think that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. The Orthodox community, we all know it. We don't even need a study to establish it. It is growing. They have more children. They get married younger, etc. The same in Israel. It's the same thing in Israel, and that's a fact, and it's not going away. But what you have are people who are secular Jews, many of whom, my generation, my parents' generation, staunchly pro-Israel, staunchly pro-anything Jewish. That's changing, and I think you alluded to it, Mark. I think that started, with all of the emphasis the Jews put on education, and rightly so. But when everybody started moving out of their various neighborhoods and going to universities all over the country where they meet and they assimilate, etc., I mean, that was the beginning, I believe, of the trend. I don't know if there were empirical studies that support it, but that's at least my observation. And I think the central question is, how does one deal with the lack, whether you call it assimilation or not, but the lack of interest on so many younger and even middle-aged Jews with either Israel or other things Jewish is really a concern. And I would be the last person to tell you how you do that. But I know from legal action I've been involved in the campuses, it's a serious problem there. I mean, I've seen...
Is it more serious now than it was before?
I think so. I see on the campuses, I'm involved in litigation at Berkeley, and I've come to know a lot about the Muslim Student Association, an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, Students for Justice in Palestine, who orchestrate these anti-Israeli demonstrations every year, Apartheid Week. But it's not just those students who are orchestrating it. There are many Jewish kids, and to me this is the most infuriating, many Jewish faculty members, people who of intellect, who should know better, and it's a serious problem.
I don't think you can collapse two different things. There is hostility to Israel, including hostility expressed among Jewish students. But far more widespread is indifference to Israel.
I agree completely. And
That's the
but
function.
but at some point they all come together, because what it does is it reflects a lack of support.
I want to
They
touch.
combine, yeah.
I want to touch very quickly on a couple of issues before this time with you ends. But I'm really looking for just a headline. In some way, this is my question is an outgrowth. There remains in Israel a tension between what's called now the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, and mainstream Judaism and mainstream secular Israeli life. One of the things that made some news was on October 17th, when Anat Hoffman, who represents Women on the Wall, was arrested when she wore a talit and tried to pray on Rosh Chodesh at the wall. Not only was she arrested, but there's some suggestion that she really went through some physical abuse that was totally unnecessary and unwarranted. But again, the headline for you, where does, as we end 2012, the issue of ultra-Orthodoxy in Israel stand as a social issue in Israel and on the world Jewish scene?
I think we're witnessing a backlash against ultra-Orthodoxy expressed in things like the Anat Hoffman incident. and that ultra-Orthodox Haredi leaders are going to have to ask themselves very seriously, do we really want to stand in the way of letting our children go into the army? Do we really want to be seen as the people obstructing democracy? Do we really want to have a chief rabbinate that imposes coercive values on issues of marriage and divorce and burial? In all those areas, Haredi leaders have always seen themselves as holding on to what they have. They've now provoked a backlash. I think as we enter in 2013, that backlash will continue, because ultimately it's a struggle about what is the meaning of a Jewish state. If it means a halachic Haredi state, 90% of Israelis are going to say absolutely not.
Is it a legitimate issue of 2012?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Something you can speak to perhaps better than anybody here. 2012 marked the second of 15 years that Alan Gross is sentenced to spend incarcerated in Cuba. We all, we're very aware of Gilad Shalit. I don't know how many people now are aware of Alan Gross. How important is Alan Gross in the 2012 perspective?
Well, it's important because a Jewish person is being incarcerated simply because he is who he is, and for no other reason. And it's important also to note that the community at large has not come to fulfill the incumbent commandment of trying to really redeem him. It has relatively been a secret to establishment and certainly to the masses. So there's not been a major move to stand up and say, let's apply pressure to do this. There are a lot of back-channel communications between the Jewish communities in Cuba and Jewish community leadership in Cuba, as well as lower-level leadership in the United States and Cuba. There could be serious pressure that could be applied, and it could be possible to get this guy out, but it requires some sense of organization, and the organizations have not been there. There's no one who's really taking the wheel here, and if there would be, then I would guarantee within 3 to 4 months he could be freed.
But it is a factor of 2012.
It is absolutely a factor. It also shows that this is not a significant issue for the people who are making decisions. That troubles me a little bit because every human life, we talk about this all the time, the human life and Jewish human life, and remember this person is identified clearly and simply because of his Jewishness, and that's important to understand. I think that value is diminished a little bit because no one's picked up the gauntlet.
So I want to know. Time magazine always gives us a man of the year.
Yeah.
As you look at 2012, who would you, if there was a magazine that did this, if Shalom TV had its man of the year, as you look at the sweep of the year, is there somebody, male, female, who you say, I think, look, he is obviously the dominant figure in the Jewish world today?
Well, if you're looking for a real prominent Jewish hero, I don't know. I don't know. No one really stands.
That's honest.
No one stands out. I've got to say something, though, Mark. You talk about personalities on a personal level and also professionally, and you'll know it when I mention it. We lost this year a man who was very close to Shalom TV, who appeared on here many times, who was a tremendous Jewish activist, who died last Pesach at the age of 59.
Much too young.
Elon Steinberg, a very close personal friend. We were in battles together on the same side. You
appeared here often together.
We all the time. He was an activist. He stepped on a lot of toes, and what he represented to me was the fact that individuals, a handful of individuals, single individuals who are dedicated, who are activists, who do things, can make a difference. And the history that he was involved in demonstrated that.
I'm very glad you mentioned Elon.
But he was involved in a lot of historic things
special
behind the
human
scenes, and I just wanted to say that was a big loss in 2012.
And he did wonderful work with the World Jewish Congress.
Yeah.
Is there a person that you would designate as the person of the year in the Jewish community?
Didn't make as big a splash as some did. I mean, it would be very easy to turn around and talk about Benjamin Netanyahu, who's obviously made a great deal of a presence. I think someone who did something in Israel bears a lot of watching, and that's Naftali Bennett. What he did was he unified the right wing of several Israeli right-wing parties to come together to, I think they're calling it now Jewish Home. Several of these right-wing parties, some of which were in the coalition this time, some of which weren't, and he has put them together, and the polls show him doing 15 seats, 16 seats?
13 to 15.
I mean,
What's the
doing...
name of his party?
Habayit
Home.
Hayahudi.
which is the old National Religious Party.
It's the old National Religious Party. You turn around and see what he's doing. I mean, we know that Bibi was trying to form a broader right-wing party by bringing in Avigdor Lieberman's party. Keep your eye on Naftali
All right,
Bennett.
I'm glad you mentioned it. Incidentally, we did not talk about the mega coalition that lasted for about an instant and a half. We did not talk about the problems of Avigdor Lieberman and what that does. We really didn't talk about the political scene of Israel. I would love to, but you can't do everything. So, Micah, is there an individual you think is the person of the year?
Yeah, I think that if Time Magazine could alter the model a little bit, I'm going to alter it also. I would put the Man of the Year, for Shalom TV at least, to be the Iron Dome. And you remember the year that the computer was the Man of the Year
Yes, I do.
for Time Magazine? So I'm saying the Iron Dome. I think the Iron Dome did something that injected a sense of security, safety, power, and even vision, future of security and safety to not just the people of Israel, to Jews around the world, and the Democrats around the world who want to buy that product and can't yet, because it's still by treaty, they cannot sell it.
Democracies.
Democracies that want to purchase this. It gave something that was, and that's really what you want in this kind of symbol. So I think the Iron Dome really, for me,
That's lovely.
was a symbol of that creation, and I think said the right things, not just to Israel, but in general across the board.
So, first of all, are there things on your list that we didn't talk about?
Sure, lots of things we can talk about.
Just mention them.
I think we should be spending some time on on the forthcoming Israeli elections. That certainly is
On the political scene in Israel.
Yeah, we
Okay.
need to reflect on the presidential election and
It
here
did
in the
have
States.
impact here, I think.
Absolutely. We need to reflect on what, if anything, is the future of a two-state solution, and we did touch upon it.
Yes,
but
we did
there's a
last
real
week.
debate that is this something American Jews should be supporting, and we've seen different views on that. But we didn't have to give that a full debate. So there are major.
We'll have to just continue.
By all means, sure,
Okay.
yeah. So
And
there are
Kevin,
Who's
major-
your person of the year?
well, I
Kevin
will-
Euclid's joining the Yankees.
I
Right?
will,
Is that
I
it?
will confess that in all my years, the only Time Magazine Person of the Year I remember is when they nominated Richard Nixon, I think in 1969, I guess when he was first inaugurated. Beyond that, I'm clueless as to what other Time men or Persons of the Year. Therefore, I'm not sure exactly what the criteria are, but what I would say is that what this year represented, as Susan mentioned a bit earlier, was the 25th anniversary of the December 6th rally. That December 6th rally was symbolic of what I would call the greatest Jewish foreign policy success of the late 20th century, of the second half of the 20th century. The person that embodied that, what I call Jewish foreign policy success, is Natan Sharansky. Now, in that sense, first of all, he is still a major figure in terms of heading up the Jewish Agency. I won't say his impact has been greater than some of the other people that have been mentioned, but what I would say, if you're talking about who was the person of the year, who best captured what I call this Jewish success narrative, yes, it's Natan Sharansky.
That's
And,
lovely.
and to add to that, I think that might have been the last time that the Jewish world was really united
I agree.
on every front. There were very few issues that you could say that about. Certainly Israel is not one of them, unfortunately. And frankly, I remember when I was heading up the war crimes prosecutions, that was something where we garnered support from every element,
Yes.
every aspect of the Jewish community.
This has been just delightful. Isn't this amazing to have these four people here giving us insight, sharing the past year and preparing us for the new year? Thank you so very, very much. I love you all very, very, very much. You're fantastic. I wish every one of you a secular, happy, healthy, prosperous
Peaceful.
year,
Peaceful.
year, and one in which you will sit with me often on Shalom TV, which I also think is one of the great things that's happened in 2012.
Amen.
Is that
Amen.
fair enough?
Absolutely.
My guests, Stephen Bayme, Susie Rosenbluth, Micah Halpern, Neal Sher. They've helped celebrate the end of 2012, the beginning of 2013. Again, I invite any of you who can do so, please be in touch with us. Anything you send me, I will share with our 4 guests. Anything about the past year as we end it, the new year as we begin it, please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. Until the next time, first of all of you, have a healthy, safe, prosperous, successful, fulfilling 2013, and be with Shalom TV as much as you possibly can. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.